In this video, you are going to learn how to run a click and backing tracks for your worship band. I'm going to unpack in great detail all of my top recommendations for software and hardware so you can make an informed decision on which system is best for your church. If you and your band have been on the fence about implementing a click and tracks in worship, I'll tell you right now, it's going to be one of the best decisions you've ever made for your worship team. Keep watching this video because you'll learn exactly how to go about building a click and tracks rig that works great for your church. Coming up. My name is Jake Goslin with Churchfront.com, helping you lead gospel-centered and tech-savvy worship. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our latest content to help you grow yourself and grow your worship ministry. The first question we want to answer is, why should we even bother implementing a click and tracks in worship? I've got 4 reasons. Reason number 1, a click track will help your band members play in time with one another. There will be no more rushing or dragging of your worship songs, and I don't care how good a drummer is, nobody has absolute perfect time all the time. And having a click track is going to make sure there's so much more consistency and that the songs are at the tempo that they're supposed to be. Reason number 2 you should be using a click and tracks is it gives you the ability to use guide cues. Guide cues tell you what part of the song is coming up next. It sounds like this: intro 2, 3, 4, or verse 2, 3, 4, or chorus 2, 3, 4. Guide cues make it so much easier to learn songs really quickly and to make sure during the service that nobody forgets what's coming up next. I also love how guide cues give you the ability to just start a song because it's counting off the song and into everybody's in-ear monitors, and you don't have to have a drummer count off with his or her sticks. The third reason why you want to use a click and tracks in worship is to help supplement the sound of your band. I know a lot of us worship leaders struggle to fully staff our bands, right? It's really hard to find enough volunteers for a 5 to 10 person band, and we also want to sound like Hillsong Worship or Elevation Worship, but we don't have 5 electric guitarists like they do. Heck, I don't even think they don't even have 5 electric guitarists. A lot of these big bands that you hear, when they record those albums live, they're actually using a ton of backing tracks as well that they just pre-recorded. So backing tracks make that big sound really accessible for us worship leaders serving at smaller to mid-sized churches. The fourth reason why we should be using a click and tracks in worship is because it allows us to start syncing up lighting and lyric cues throughout worship. Every Sunday at our church, we use Ableton Live to cue up all the lyric slides running in Pro Presenter and all of our lighting cues that are running in Light Key, which is our DMX software. The only way this is possible to do is if your band is playing along with the song in the right timing, so then you can put all those cues there in your Ableton project and everything will just happen seamlessly when it's supposed to throughout the worship service. So that's the fourth reason. That's a big one for me. I'm a huge geek about Ableton Live and automating things because it just makes things go so smoothly in worship. It eliminates so many mistakes. In order to get up and running smoothly with a click and tracks, you need to make sure your band has in-ear monitoring. In-ear monitoring is important because you want your band members to hear the click and the guide cues in their ears. You can't be sending that signal through the floor wedges or else that will just sound really weird. If you don't have in-ear monitoring, I'm going to link my ultimate guide to in-ear monitoring for churches below this one, so you can check that out and figure out what system is best for your church and your budget. Now that you know why you would want to use a click and tracks in worship and that you need to have in-ear monitoring, let's talk about the software and gear to make it possible to run a click and tracks for your worship band. A click and backing tracks rig consists of 3 parts. First, you have the software, which is playing back all the audio files, whether it's the click, the guide cues, as well as ambient pads or other backing tracks you may buy. The second part is a playback device, which is simply running that software that is running the audio files. And then the third piece of the rig is a connectivity device to send the audio from your playback device to your front of house sound console. So it goes through the sound system, the main PA, as well as the in-ear monitors. So those are the three parts: the software, the playback device, and the connectivity device. First, let's talk about the software options. My number one recommendation for software for running a click, tracks, and doing a whole lot of other cool things for your worship ministry is Ableton Live. Of all the software options, Ableton is hands down the most powerful for running a click in tracks in worship. That's why bands like Hillsong, Elevation, Bethel, Jesus Culture, Red Rocks Worship, they all use Ableton Live to run their tracks. Ableton Live is the great route to go if you're super serious about running a click in tracks and automation, which I'll tell you about later. And it's a great route to go if you have the funds. The software itself, it's $500 for the standard version, which is what I always recommend for worship leaders. And then I recommend having a MacBook Pro available to actually run the software during worship. It runs on PC as well, but I found it's much more stable on a Mac, and when it comes to automating and running lyrics and lights with Ableton, it's just so much easier if you're using an all Mac ecosystem. Because Ableton Live is such a powerful digital audio workstation, it's actually used for a lot of things other than just running a click in tracks in worship, it can be really intimidating to learn. That's why I created a 60-minute long Ableton Live masterclass for worship leaders. It's gonna walk you through my 7-step process for running a click, tracks, and automating lyrics and lighting in worship. I'm gonna link that below this video. My next recommendation for software is the Prime app. Prime is an app created by Loop, or also known as Loop Community. And you can learn all about this software at loopcommunity.com. It is an iOS-based software, so it runs on your iPhone as well as an iPad. It can also run on a Mac operating system, which is awesome. It's a completely free app, and this app was designed specifically for this purpose of running a click in tracks in worship. The user interface is simple, super user-friendly. The other cool thing about the Loop Community Prime ecosystem is that you can actually have free cloud storage to store all of your tracks in their cloud, whether you could buy them from somewhere else, you could buy them from Loop Community, and they'll keep them stored in the cloud, and then you open up the app on your phone or your iPad, and they're gonna show up right there in the app within your account. Then my third recommendation for software is the Playback app. This app is created by the team at multitracks.com. Very similar to Prime, it's very user-friendly. It runs only on iOS devices. This does not have a Mac version, which is a little bit of a downside to it. But once again, this app was designed specifically for worship leaders and worship bands to run a click in tracks in worship, so they've made it so darn easy. There's one edge I think Playback has over the Loop Community platform, and that is their rental program. When you start getting tracks to use for worship, you're gonna discover it can get really expensive really fast, because if you buy full multi-track stems, it can cost anywhere from $25 to $35 per song. But multitracks.com has this rental program. You can pay, $50 a month or up to $100 a month to have basically just access to however many unique songs you'll need each month to use for your worship team. So those are my 3 software recommendations: Ableton Live, Prime, and Playback. I recommend Ableton Live if you're going to be really serious about this. You have at least 1 to 2 hours a week that you can spend on prepping your click and backing track sessions. And if you are just like me and you geek out about automating lyrics and lighting and other elements of production in worship. But if you just want the quick, easy way to run a click in tracks and you don't need that advanced control, then check out Prime or Playback. I recommend downloading both of them, giving both of them a try, and see which one of them you prefer. Now that we've covered the software side of things, let's talk about the actual playback device. And I've already touched on some of this a bit when I was talking about the software, but I just want to emphasize my recommendations for what type of hardware you should be using to run this software. So if you're using Ableton Live, run it on a Mac. It does work on PC, but your life is going to be much easier, especially if you do automation, if you're running everything on a Mac. If you're going the Prime and Playback route, then go ahead and find a decent iPad that you can use, especially these more recent iPads like the iPad Pro is super powerful. It can easily run either one of these apps very smoothly. Sorry, Android and Windows users, Prime and Playback do not run on those platforms, and I have not come across any solid software for running a click and tracks on those platforms. Now let's talk about getting the sound from your playback device and software to the front of house sound console. You very easily could just pull the audio from the headphone jack, whether it's from your laptop or your iPad running a click and tracks, and send the audio to your front of house console that way. Usually with those headphone jacks, what you can do is get a 3.5mm to dual 1/4-inch cable, put it into a DI box, and that's going to split it into a left and right signal. On the left, you're going to have just the click and guide cues, so that goes into its own channel on the mixer. On the right, you're going to have all your backing tracks. That goes into a separate channel. So then your front of house sound engineer can actually send just the click and guide cues to the in-ear monitoring, and then all the tracks can go to the front of house PA as well as in-ear monitors if you want to hear that. While you can pull audio out of the headphone jack on your device, I don't recommend doing that. I recommend finding a dedicated audio interface, and this can work whether you're running Ableton on a Mac or if you're running Prime or Playback on an iPad. At my church with our Ableton Live rig, we are running the Behringer 404 HD audio interface. It has 4 1/4-inch outputs on the back of the audio interface. So instead of being limited to just the 2 outputs we get from a headphone jack, being the left and right stereo, we can actually have up to 4 outputs. And here's how we divvy up our audio outputs from Ableton. We put our click and guide cues on channel 1, and then we put all of our really bass heavy tracks on channel 2. And then for channels 3 and 4, we run all the rest of the tracks in stereo. We found that this keeps our setup really simple. We could get a bigger interface and send more channels to our front of house sound console, but I want to make it easy for my sound techs to mix in the tracks with the rest of the band. But we also feel like it gives it enough separation, keeping the bass tracks separate from the other tracks, so it really clarifies our mix, and it sounds awesome. If you're using Prime or Playback on an iPad, then look up iOS compatible audio interface, because those apps work the same way as Ableton does in terms of being able to send however many channels of audio you want from the app to your sound console. With the setup we are currently using with that Behringer audio interface, we actually have to use a 1/4-inch to XLR snake to get the sound from the audio interface to our stage box. That's why I wanted to mention here another great product that just came out. I haven't tried it myself yet. I really want to get my hands on one of these, but it's called the Track Rig. It's by Loop Community, and this is an audio interface designed specifically for running tracks in worship. They have 8 XLR outputs on the front of this thing. You could just mount it in a rack if you want. You could just put your computer on top of it. It's got a USB hub on it for getting the connection from your computer to the interface, as well as plugging in any other MIDI devices that you're using alongside of your rig. So the Track Rig looks awesome. Hopefully I'll get my hands on one someday soon. I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew about it, and if you had the budget for it, I think it's definitely worth giving a try. Finally, while I'm talking about connectivity devices, one of my favorite devices I've come across is the PV USB-P audio interface. It's like a little 2-channel audio interface. It's great for if you just want to separate your backing tracks into the click on the left and all the other tracks on the right. And this audio interface is only $50, and it has 2 XLR outputs on it. So I made a whole video about that one. Definitely worth looking into if you just want a simple interface and you are using a Mac computer to run either Ableton or Prime on a Mac. To my knowledge, that interface is not compatible with iOS devices. There you have it, folks. Those are my recommendations for the software, the playback devices, and connectivity devices to build your own click and backing tracks rig for your worship band. If you feel a little overwhelmed by all of the software and gear covered here, I completely understand. I believe that any worship leader, you don't have to be super tech savvy. I think any worship leader can get all this stuff up and running at your church because the technology has come such a long way. It's so much more user friendly. But I understand it can be super intimidating getting started, and you may not even be quite sure which one of these setups is going to work best at your church. That's why I've created Worship Leader School, and inside Worship Leader School, I have step-by-step online trainings to help you get up and running with Ableton Live, from being an absolute beginner to the software to being a ninja with the software, automating lyrics and lighting. And I also have online courses on getting up and running with Prime or Playback. And if you're not sure which one of these setups is best for you or how to best customize it for your worship ministry, we can actually hop on one of my weekly office hours calls where I provide real-time coaching for worship leaders, and we can talk through your specific situation. So the next best step for you is to visit worshipleaderschool.com to learn more and join today. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you found it helpful, hit that thumbs up button and share it with your friends in worship ministry. You can check out some related videos right over here, and don't forget to subscribe to the Churchfront channel so you can continue to receive all of our latest content to help you grow yourself and grow your worship ministry.